So the next part of the chapter, really, really interesting because I don't think many people know this, but Dana Thomas talks about how the quality of garments is very different depending on the market or where it's produced. And I'll read from page 221 to 222, where she kind of highlights this. But to kind of summarize before I read it, in the EU, they might only expect you to use a certain grade of things, whereas in another country, there's no regulation. So brands will deliberately only produce the high quality garments for a specific market, and then the low quality garments go to a different market. Because I think people don't actually know this, that brands sometimes produce different clothes for different markets. I think people just think everything is the same for every brand worldwide. That might be the case for, lower, smaller brands that don't have the huge infrastructure to do things like that. But the biggest brands, the Ralph Laurens, the Chanel's, the Gucci's, they have different grade like fabrics, quality of clothes for different markets, which is insane. And that all goes down to legislation and kind of what is expected by the governments in different countries. So to read from page 221, it says, the manufacturing of clothing, like that of perfume, accessories, and every other luxury good, now follows the pyramid model. The exquisite work is produced in a very limited quantity by a coterie of highly skilled traditional craftsmen in France, Italy, and the United Kingdom. The middle range, such as ready-to-wear, is farmed out to big factories in places like Spain, North Africa, Turkey, and the former Eastern Bloc countries. Giorgio Armani said in 2005 that it produced 18% of its high-end ready-to-wear line, Armani Collezioni, in Eastern Europe. Gucci makes some of its sneakers in Serbia, and Prada does the upper part of some shoes in Slovenia. In 2004, Valentino reportedly begun to outsource its $1,300 men's suits to a factory in Cairo, where they were produced by veiled Muslim seamstresses who learned their craft by watching videos on televisions in the workshop. At the time, Italian textile workers' hourly wages were $18.63. The Egyptian workers earned 88 cents. When the suits, destined for the European market, arrived in Italy, Valentino representatives ripped out the Made in Egypt tags. In Europe, companies do not have to declare where their goods are produced. Valentino's suits for the American and Japanese markets, which have stricter laws about provenance labeling, were produced in Italy. In the United States and Japan, perceived quality is more important than real quality, explained Valentino's CEO, Michele Norsa, which is mad for him to say that. Perceived quality is more important than real quality. Wow. The cut in manufacturing costs had a positive impact on the bottom line. In 2005, Valentino posted its first profit in years. The lowest end of the luxury spectrum, like logo-covered luxury t-shirts and knitwear, are produced in developing nations such as China, Mexico, Madagascar, and Mauritius. In February 2003, I traveled to Mauritius to see the process firsthand. Mauritius is a tropical paradise so ravishing that Mark Twain once wrote, "You gather the idea that heaven was copied after Mauritius. Endless acres of lush sugarcane fields," that's like a tongue twister, lush sugarcane fields, surround jagged volcanic mountains that rise out of the sea mist like peaks of meringue. Wide, tranquil bays, wow, this is like a tongue twister. Wide, tranquil bays of vibrant turquoise are framed by swaths of fine white sand and swaying palms. Colonized over the centuries by the Dutch, the British, and the French, the island was home of the legendary dodo bird. Today, Mauritius is a favored winter holiday destination for Europeans and an offshore financial center for India. It has also been, for the last 30 years, one of the world's key centers for textile manufacturing. Textile manufacturing in Mauritius is a purely contrived industry. Unlike other major garment manufacturing countries, which also produce much of their raw materials, Mauritius imports everything, from the yarn to the packaging. Hundreds of factories dot the inland hills, where workers, predominantly women, produce sweaters, cashmere blankets, and t-shirts for everyone from discount retailers like JCPenney to luxury brands such as Giorgio Armani and Burberry. And that's so true. I mean, obviously, all these things in this book are still the case today. But the craziest thing that just confuses me to the core is, so last week I was sent a package by Marnie, right? I like Marni as a brand. I'm a big fan. I like some of the stuff that they make, not everything, but I don't really like everything for any brand. But anyway, what really stood out to me was I was sent a pair of trousers that were amazing. They fit right, really good quality cargos. Like two pairs of knitwear, which are also really good quality, and then a t-shirt. So the trousers, the quality was like really exceptional. One of the knitwear pieces, the quality was really good. The other knitwear piece, the quality seemed really bad. And the t-shirt, the quality of the t-shirt was so bad that like I don't even know what to compare it to. Like this t-shirt is by Jack Harper and this Eliza, that's the name of the brand. When you feel the quality, it's such a high quality t-shirt. I've worn this so many times and washed it, and it's as good as new. It's so structured too. I love it. This t-shirt is like it cost. I think it retailed for maybe £100. The Marni t-shirt, I had to check online to see what it retails for. It retails for £250, and the quality is worse than like Gildan. It was so. It feels like the kind of fabric that if I did that too hard, it would literally rip in two. The quality was so bad that I was shocked that a brand like Marni could even attempt to sell that kind of t-shirt. Like absolute shock, absolutely shocked. So the chapter then continues talking about Mauritius as a hub for textile manufacturing, but also a hub for cheap textile manufacturing. It's so funny because also something that I've noted in my notes is the fact that, like what I just read, where Dana Thomas writes about the fact that everything is imported to Mauritius and exported back out. So all the raw materials they need to produce stuff is imported there, and then it's exported to wherever it needs to go after it's been produced, which is so funny because we have this conversation about sustainability, and because brands are seeking cheaper and cheaper labor to increase profits, they're making things even more and more unsustainable, which is why anytime a corporation that makes billions, especially a one that is trying to see financial growth year on year, opens their mouth to talk about sustainability, for me, it goes in one ear and it comes out the other, because there's absolutely no way you can operate like that and tell me that you care about sustainability. It's just not a thing. But then she talks about how the landscape of Mauritius changed. So she talks about how it went from high unemployment to so much employment, they started offering work visas and grants to keen workers from other countries to keep the country's industry growing. So they started giving, work visas to people from China, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India to work in Mauritius. It says in 2004, there were 20,000 expats working in the manufacturing industry on the island. And it just talks about, even like kind of earlier what I said, later on, Dana Thomas kind of made a similar point where the supply chains of these things are really unsustainable. The fact that you have, fabric woven in China, dyed in Scotland, finished in USA, and then, a made in the USA label. But then production actually slowed down, and most of the production shifted to China, which is actually very interesting. So I'm actually going to read that because it's from page 225 to 226. This is a very, very interesting part, by the way. So to read from page 225, it says, Shibani has 1,800 workers on sweaters and 400 on intimate wear. Expat workers, predominantly from China and India, make up about 10% of the workforce in the sweater factories. Shibani's 4 factories run 24 hours, 7 days a week, with 4 shifts each day. The legal Mauritian work week is 45 hours. I'd rather give preference to Mauritius workers than deal with the lodging, food, passage tickets, Hassamal admitted, but imports are better skilled as machine operators and there's less absenteeism because of family duties. Plus, they don't mind working nights and Mauritians do. When the break was over, the Chinese girls snapped up and went right back to work. Their faces were blank, their eyes empty, no one spoke. All you could hear was the deafening sit, sit, sit of the knitting machines. By 2003, Mauritius textile and clothing manufacturing export sales amounted to roughly $1.5 billion, and that's by 2003, that's a lot. The sector employed about 40% of the country's workforce and contributed 12% to the gross domestic product. As a result, Mauritius had the highest per capita gross domestic product in sub-Saharan Africa. There's evidence of the prosperity in Mauritius everywhere you turn: new European cars, restaurants, shopping centres, and housing construction. Textile manufacturing is a main pillar of our economy, trade chairman Gopal told me. But that maybe headed the way of the dodo. On January 1st, 2005, the World Trade Organization eliminated the 30-year-old textile quotas that gave birth to thriving manufacturing centers in developing nations such as Mauritius, Bangladesh, Madagascar, and Sri Lanka. Mauritius was perhaps the worst hit. According to the apparel industry consultant David Birnbaum of Third Horizon Limited in Winners and Losers 2005, a study of the economic impact of the phase-out of 28 key garment-producing countries. In 2003 and 2004, Mauritius lost 30 companies employing 15,000 apparel and textile workers. And Birnbaum reports that textile shipments from Mauritius to the United States in 2004 were down by 17.5% from 2003. Not surprisingly, the majority of producers have moved their manufacturing to China. The Chinese work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They live in the factory and are paid pennies an hour, Michael Mayer told me. How can we compete with that? So that's how production obviously shifted from Mauritius to China, which was obviously even cheaper because that's kind of what they wanted. It's kind of interesting how, kind of like a side story, how China opening their doors for these big companies to manufacture there kind of killed the Hong Kong manufacturing industry, because Hong Kong at the time had a really big textile manufacturing industry, and all the people that were producing in Hong Kong literally just shifted production to China because it just made more financial sense. There was even a part in the chapter where a guy who was huge in the manufacturing industry in Hong Kong talked about why he himself actually moved to Hong Kong. So that's definitely a really important part to read. And it's also funny how a lot of these luxury brands were pretending to, produce in the West, but actually they were producing in China. Actually, let me see, because I think there was a page, I think it was like 228, where they talked about that. That would be actually good to read, to be fair. Okay, let me read that. So from page 228, it says, as China's manufacturing base grew, Hong Kong shrank. Chinese workers' skills improved and production quality increased, yet costs remained low. Soon high-end and luxury brands began to relocate their clothing manufacturing from Europe, the United States, Hong Kong, Mauritius, and elsewhere to China. In a matter of days, in the fall of 2005, I heard from manufacturing and industry sources in China that several prestigious Italian brands manufactured ready-to-wear and knitwear there in pieces and had the items assembled in Italy to carry the Made in Italy label. And Christian Lacroix had knitwear made there. Fang said, we do it for Ralph Lauren and a small amount for Donna Karan, which, since 2001, has been an LVMH brand. I was told by a senior Burberry executive in Hong Kong in December 2004 that the British-based company produced a small bit of luggage in China. It's experimental, tiny. A day later, a source who worked with Burberry at the time told me, Burberry's production in China is more than experimental, it is big quantities, which obviously is what these brands do. They pretend that they don't produce outside of the West because they're trying to sell a dream, even though the reality is they're just lying. But anyway, continuing, said it was primarily leather goods and accessories produced in China. Some of the lower priced Burberry Blue Label, a licensed line that is produced by the Japanese firm Sanyo Shokai Limited for the Japanese market, is manufactured in China as well. I remembered the Burberry trench my husband tried on in Xi'an and thought to myself, maybe it was real. In September 2006, Burberry announced it was shuttering a factory in South Wales that had been in operation since 1939 and produced polo shirts, leaving 300 out of work and moving the production to China. In November, Welsh actor Ian Grufford, who had modelled in a Burberry ad campaign, protested the closure. And the Times of London reported that Prince Charles contacted Welsh government ministers to ask if there was anything he could do to stop the move. Peter Hain, Britain's Secretary of State for the Northern Ireland and Wales, asked Burberry CEO Angela Adrent to rethink the move, and the Church of England, which has a $4.9 million stake in the company, requested a formal explanation. We found the cost of producing the polo shirts offshore were substantially lower than the cost in Wales. That says the coast in Wales, but I guess that's supposed to write the cost. Michael Mahoney, Burberry's Director of Commercial Affairs, said at the time, in fact, they were less than half. The only luxury designer I heard openly embrace manufacturing clothing in China was Giorgio Armani. The Made in Italy label is very important for the top line because it suggests a certain specialization, he said during his visit to China in 2004. But to manufacture some of our other lines in China, as long as we control the quality, why not? So that kind of shows you how, textile manufacturing kind of moved away from different markets and, moved to China essentially.